technology explosion that happened after World War II, we had a fix for almost everything. You know, antibiotics became really prevalent and available so that we could treat animals if they were ill. More pesticides were available because we had tried to fight malaria and that sort of thing in the Pacific for that part of the war. So I wonder if that just wasn't the mindset that we were solving a lot of problems in the late 40s and early 50s.
America, you're learning about this now. Ag folks, we've been paying attention to this for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Because this has been we knew that these things had gotten around the Darien Gap. They were in Mexico and marching north.
As animals become more expensive, as they become more productive and worth more money, and as our technologies have allowed us to keep a bit closer eye on them, I think we see these animals much more often.
This is nothing new. We've fought this battle before. We're fighting it today with better tools, better medicine, better techniques, better livestock management skills, better. I mean, we're as a whole, we're doing a better job of looking at these animals than you know, like to your point, they probably did in the 40s and 50s. If we got rid of them in the late 50s and 60s, I mean, I think we should be able to do a better job today than we did then. I mean,
watching my friends blowing by in the wind. Not that I lost it all. Yeah, lost a life, lost a ways, and come now, easy going. Every now and then, still comes around, trying to steal my soul. What could have been a dream?
hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 4 of the Fenceline, and we've Dr. Abney. How are you?
I'm just so wonderful I can hardly stand it. How are you?
I was any better, I'd be you. I was any better, I'd be you. It's been too much, like crossing the stream from Ghostbusters.
Exactly like that.
Well, it is. It's definitely been interesting. What a great following. Hey, thank you for all of you that are following us. We're building followers by the week. Appreciate all the watches out there. Still, hey, send us comments. We're getting a few. Comment and let us know what it is you'd like to hear us talk about. But this week, things are a little screwy. So
well, Kelly said if we're wrong about something. That's always, people love that on the internet.
Yeah.
They can tell somebody they're wrong.
How about Brad Good bringing us in a little whiskey and rain there? My buddy Brad Good. You know, whiskey and rain. We need both those things in agriculture, but mostly the rain.
We can make do with one or not the other.
Well, you can't have one without the other. So it'd probably be better off with one, not the other. But hey, it has been a big week in news, in food and agriculture, and I know my phone, my email, my inbox been blowing up. I'm sure your has too.
Definitely.
About one huge topic affecting our beef industry, our livestock industry, and potentially our food supply, agriculture in general, possibly the health and well-being of people and their pets. And people have questions, and by golly, we have answers. So let's get right to screwworm, Dr. Abney, the New World screwworm. And why is it the New World screwworm? Is this not the Old World screwworm? Why is that?
Well, I think there are a variety of those kind of flies in the world that have, for lack of a better term, carnivorous larvae. So, yeah, I think that's why they differentiate there on New World versus Old World. But
gotcha. So
it's a great name too, screwworm. It just
screwworm
feels.
So and why is it a screwworm? Why is a screwworm not a maggot? Why do they name it that? Why is it called that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you think about classically when we think about fly larvae, which house flies, stable flies, the flies that we're used to seeing,
maggots.
That's one way to term that, and that is a technical term. That is a scientific term. It's not the cleanest one, but
well, it's more like people are familiar with maggots. Yeah. They've seen those larvae.
So if you leave your garbage outside, that every fly came from a maggot. And we'll talk about the life cycle of the screwworm here in just a minute. We've got a nice little infographic, but the big difference between a regular house fly, a stable fly, the flies we're used to, the maggots, the larvae that they have versus the screwworm larvae that come from the screwworm fly, is that maggots from houseflies, stable flies, they eat dead tissue. They eat organic matter. And so actually in medicine, they will use maggots to clean wounds sometimes. If there's a lot of dead tissue, necrotic tissue on a wound that needs debridement, I always say that wrong because it looks like it should be debridement.
Pedantic.
That's Dr. Pedantic to you. So debridement, to clean that tissue, a lot of times they will put live maggots of a certain variety in there to eat that dead tissue because they will only eat the dead tissue and leave the healthy live tissue alone.
That's not in the 1700s.
No.
That's today.
No.
That's today.
Just like we use leeches sometimes to improve blood flow and that sort of thing to damage limbs. So those are the maggots and the larvae that we're used to, and the house flies and the stable flies that we're used to. Screwworm flies only consume live flesh. They've got some pretty nasty looking mandibles. I will caution folks out there, be careful about your Google image searches when you're trying to learn about screwworms. It can get pretty graphic pretty quickly. And we're going to discuss some stuff today that's going to sound not too much fun, because it is not too much fun. But again, how the sausage is made, we're going to tell you exactly how things work.
Called a screwworm because they kind of have a screwing action. They will corkscrew down into the flesh. They kind of screw themselves. They bore in.
Those nasty looking mandibles, they eat into the flesh.
Bore in. They drill in. So that's
why
why
they call it
screwworm.
It's even in their Latin name. The first part of their Latin name, cochlea, means to be.
I made a note there. Cochlea. I wrote it down.
I hope you're going to pronounce it because I can't. But
you're the PhD.
Their body looks a little bit like a corkscrew.
Like a screw. That's why it's called a screwworm.
Yeah.
And so what makes them different, and they have that name, but what makes them different than other fly larvae is their propensity to eat live flesh, not dead flesh.
They're obligate carnivores, basically. They have to have live tissue like that outside of some of the sterile fly facilities we'll talk about. But in the wild, they will only lay those eggs where they can get into live tissue.
Well, I'd like for you to talk about the history, because there's nothing new under the sun. And for those of us been around agriculture for a while, we've heard from our grandparents about the boll weevil and the screwworm. So my granddad, he had screwworm trauma till the day he died, and I've heard all about screwworms in my youth. So this, just so people know, this is not brand new. We faced this challenge before and we won. So could you walk us through the history, kind of give us some background on this parasite, its history in North America, and how we kind of, we'll get into that battle, but give us some background and history on this parasite.
Yeah, and I'm glad you called it a parasite, because that's really what it is. It's a parasite that's an external parasite. That's the way we think of it, because internal parasites, generally, they are going to be in the intestinal tract or maybe in the bloodstream. External parasites get on the outside of the body and may migrate in a little bit, but this insect doesn't migrate down into, those kind of tissues. They stay external to the rest of the body. So they are endemic to the southern part of the United States, Mexico, Central America, on and down into South America past the equator as well. So they've been here. This isn't an insect that was introduced. This isn't something that came in on a ship from somewhere else.
Didn't come over. We don't have to blame China. They didn't come here on a shipping container with.
Well, let's pause there for just a second, because online, where we're all anonymous and we get to say all the things that we think, and
everything's true.
Everything's true. So there's a lot of things we need to debunk about this. But if you think the other side, whoever the other side may be to you,
those guys, not my side,
is to blame for this, good news. You're 100% right. Bad news is there's enough blame for everybody. There's no one singular event that I can look at in my research and say this is what caused this whole thing to happen. Because as we'll talk about in a few minutes, we pushed them down, and then
let's go over so they were here. So we documented they were here.
Back into as soon as Europeans got here, they noticed these worms.
We've known about them for hundreds of years.
Yeah,
but then they became an epidemic post World War II or post World War I. Really, kind of.
Well, from what I read, we started to focus on them in the early 20s or so, maybe even a little bit further than that, and they just didn't have a good way to control them until the sterile insect technique came about. So it wasn't really that they weren't a known problem. It wasn't that people didn't want to eradicate them. You read lots of old books and see lots of references to them in there, but we just didn't have a good way to do that. Breaking that life cycle, that's really what allows you, and we'll talk more about the life cycle, but if you're going to control an insect, you've got to find a niche in that life cycle that you can get a wedge in there and break it.
But it obviously became a big problem for my grandparents in the 40s and 50s, and really came to a head in the 50s. And I don't know exactly, I can't figure out exactly why it became a problem. I think maybe more European style cattle were prominent at that point versus, these longhorns that were here, they just survived. We think about Brahman cattle being somewhat insect resistant, disease resistant.
Just to be clear, that doesn't mean that those animals can't be
That
affected
does
by
not
this.
mean, they just mean they had the propensity to be a little bit more resistant.
I wonder if what you
tolerant.
saw there was, or what your granddad saw, and why there became a bigger focus on it was just when you look at the technology explosion that happened after World War II, we had a fix for almost everything. Antibiotics became really prevalent and available so that we could treat animals if they were ill. More pesticides were available because we had tried to fight malaria and that sort of thing in the Pacific for that part of the war. So I wonder if that just wasn't the mindset that we were solving a lot of problems in the late 40s and early 50s because of the technology that came out of the war effort. And I wonder if that's not just an outgrowth of that.
Well, and then they're probably castrating cattle, which is a way. So how do these things get in the way?
Castrating them in a different place in the
So they, that if you think about how this parasite gets in the animal, it's through an open wound. Usually, there's a few. I've been told there's a few soft spots on newborn calves they can get in, but the navel on a newborn calf, that's a area of concern.
Yeah, that's an open.
That's open wound. So there are a lot of times what they would do is they would go treat those newborn calves with. But I'm really curious. I've tried to see what there was. All I know is it was nasty, and it was either black or purple. And your hand, my granddad said he didn't have clean hands for 15 years. They had that junk on them.
And knowing our practices in that time period, it probably caused 9 kinds of cancer.
Yeah.
Sure. Probably why you can't find it. It's been wiped from the record.
Yeah, that's why they've wiped it from the record. It probably wasn't essential oil based. But they would treat these calves, and they were out having to treat them after they castrate. So castration, words matter. So you understand. So castration is the fit. We use a knife and cut that calf. Now, castration is really removing the testicles of the male. Now, interesting, my granddad, he emasculated his cattle. He would not open wound. He would never let me. I worked his cattle as a teenager when they got too old to work their cattle. He would not let me knife cut those calves. And that means, we cut the scrotum open, and that's how we've done it for hundreds of years. That's how castration worked. A technique in emasculation, I know someone's out there like, emasculation is when you cut it all off. We're not talking Chinese eunuch emasculation. So emasculation, we use bands now. Banding is a form of emasculation. But we had these banders, and he would calibrate them, and he'd use a piece of paper and a cotton string.
You're talking about the Burdizzo that crushed them.
So what it would do would crush the cord inside the skin, and the testicle would be down in that scrotum, and then the body absorb it. It'd go on. The body's an amazing thing.
But no open wound.
But no open wound. But till the day, even though the screwworm got right, till the day he died, my granddad would not let us castrate a male calf because he fought screwworms in the 40s and 50s.
He had screwworm PTSD.
He had screwworm PTSD till he died. So it became a problem for whatever reason, it got to a point that it was a serious problem. So in 1954, a couple of scientists figured out that they could sterilize male flies with irradiation.
Not bacterial sterilization or pasteurization.
They would make the male fly not be able to. He's impotent. He's not fertile. And so they figured that out. And then from 1958 to 1962, United States Department of Agriculture went hard in the paint. They went hard on eradicating the screwworm. And with the technology they had then, the facilities they had then, the airplanes they had then, they would fly and drop these sterile flies over these areas, and they got rid of them. So
okay, no, I think.
Or sorry,
I'm Captain Pedantic or Dr. Pedantic, but they drove them out of the United States.
Correct. We were, and somebody's gonna be like, 1974, there was a case in New Brunswick, but they were not a problem. They were not a problem in the United States. We had, quote unquote, eradicated them like we have the boll weevil now. We had pushed them out of the United States. But we continued, the United States and Mexico. I want to point out that Mexico and the United States have been longtime partners in this screwworm program. So I saw a number that from 19 1964 till the 1976, they released 94 billion sterile flies over the southern United States and over Mexico. And that's how they drove them out. And they continued this sterile fly program up until around, the somewhere along the way in the late 90s, early, they said, hey, you know what? I think we got this thing whooped. We don't have to keep fighting this fight. They
pushed them down past the Darien Gap.
And so they said, so the standard has been for a very long time the Darien Gap. And what is the Darien Gap? So when you look at North America and South America and that little bitty, where the umbilical cord that attaches us to South America, Panama, there's a gap there, the narrowest part, and there's actually a break, and there's some islands there. And that choke point, the Darien Gap, we have been able to quarantine cattle south of that line and south of that connecting point since the 60s. And amazingly, from the 1960s until somewhere around COVID, and here's where you get to pick whose side you get to blame.
Yeah.
And which country you get to blame. And we'll talk about some theories of how the Darien Gap got violated. But we didn't have New World screwworm north of that.
Well, and they picked that spot because they could push them down to that, but eradication into South America with the political climate that's down there and all the fun stuff that was happening during that time, the political will just wasn't there to push them further south than that. But that gave us kind of almost like the DMZ between North and South Korea. That gave us a place to concentrate and almost literally carpet bomb continuously.
So this Darien Gap, so Panama, we continually have had sterile flies there. We have kept that as a safe zone.
That's the only active sterile fly production facility that I'm aware of
right now. Which we're going to get to treatment of these things in a minute and talk about sterile fly facilities. So we had this program. We had a plan. Plan was being executed. Plan worked. Things are going well. I want to talk about South America and why various countries, for various reasons, it's like, well, if we did such a good job here, why not get rid of it in South America? Well, if we go country by country, Brazil is big. It's just big. America's big. We talk about how Europeans can't get their mind around America. Brazil is massive and remote. So that would be a challenge. Then you get in the political will of Uruguay, Paraguay, and Venezuela refusing to let us fly planes over their airspace and release these flies. They're like, well, I don't know, but whatever they would not allow that to happen. Not America, Mexico, Panama, they would not cooperate for this sterile fly program. So they've just kind of been living with it down there for this whole time, and it fluctuates populations up and down. They don't have winter there, and we're going to talk a minute about the life cycle and how cold affects it. But it's important for people to understand that this has been a South America problem for a long time, and we've held it at bay. Then post-COVID, somewhere post-COVID, 21, 22, 23, the Darien Gap was violated. And I have talked to several people, and we have some theories. We don't know. I don't know. You may know. I don't know how they got here.
I don't think anybody. I'd state categorically that nobody knows how that happened, regardless of what you saw on the book face.
Whatever you saw on the social media. So the theories, and I would like to hear what theories you've heard put forward. So one of the theories that's been out there for a while, because remember, this is America. You're learning about this now. Ag folks, we've been paying attention to this for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Because this has been we knew that these things had gotten around the Darien Gap. They were in Mexico and marching north. Just like the fire ants got here. And these things are kind of like fire ants. We're going to deal with them. One of the theories was that, and of course the biggest theory right now, the biggest accusation is the cartels. The cartels were smuggling cattle in through the Darien Gap.
Not that they moved the screwworm on purpose, but it's just they
were somehow skirting the quarantine system of Central America. Man, I don't know. Anything's possible with enough bribe money, but they've had that quarantine system down there, the inspection system. So 21 days. Of quarantine to bring anything through so that the life cycle would be broken or detected. So somehow they got past that. So maybe it was the cartels. They're definitely, I think they're kind of like the that one kid in your family gets blamed for everything. So I think they're the easiest. Nobody likes the cartels, so that's easy blame. So that's one theory. Another theory was there were a lot of people who migrated up from South America through the Darien Gap into Mexico and a lot of the United States in the 21 through 23 time frame. So there's a theory that people brought it to the United States, which the answer to the question, can people get screwworms? Yes, they can. There was a documented case a year or two ago of a woman who was on vacation in South America. She'd been in Brazil and Uruguay, then back to Brazil and flew home, and she had screwworms in her body. They treated her in a hospital. She's fine.
We'll talk about why that's pretty unlikely for people.
Pretty unlikely, but it is possible.
Possible, but improbable.
It'd be very improbable that it is possible. It's probably improbable that people brought those through the Darien Gap. I talked to two different large Mexican ranchers who both had the same. They were. I'm saying this is their theory. This is fact. In their mind, this was fact. And they were accusing a large beef packer in Mexico of skirting the system and bringing South American cattle, which are cheaper, around by ship into Mexico, and through bribes and illicit means brought those cattle into Mexico. And they were as confident in that is how they got there as I am that the sun's going to come up tomorrow.
But again,
we don't know.
They didn't say that they did that on purpose. They did that to bring the screwworm in.
They didn't do that. They were skirting the system to bring cheaper cattle in. So, however, it is most likely these got into Mexico in cattle or other livestock. Most likely.
However, they got into Mexico. Once they got into the wider part of Mexico, I've really begun to think about this as a choke point thing with Panama and the Darien Gap and that sort of deal. But once they got into the central part of Mexico, they were coming to the U.S. Well, it was a win, not an if, in my mind, especially with the infrastructure that we had allowed to sunset by that point.
That was these guys' point, was that and they were more up to speed on how it had spread through Mexico. And they had said it didn't work its way up the Yucatan Peninsula. Yeah. So their accusation is it got into that wide part of central Mexico way faster than that. Their accusation is they moved south in Mexico from central Mexico, that they moved north and south. Again, prominent ranching families from Mexico.
I've seen some tracking that might debunk that.
Debunks that. Well, they would probably say that, in Mexico, everything is bought and paid for and bribed. So they're very skeptical guys. Anyway, I'm skeptical. These guys are really skeptical. Anyway, but it got to Mexico. So we've been getting ready. I mean, we've been working in the United States for over a year now to get ready. So they're coming.
I think you talk to people that have been in government who've been getting ready for it for several years. Once it breached the Darien Gap, then it was just, again, back to political will. Pick your side. Pick your side who you want to throw the tomato at. But just, we have to prioritize things. That's part of having a budget. We're not great at that, but that's.
And the government doesn't move fast.
No, not
so.
More at the speed of smell.
So you would say that Department of Agriculture, previous administration, they were preparing. They knew this Darien Gap had been breached. It was a discussion point. Plans were being made under that administration.
Yeah, I think this new facility that's going to be in Edinburgh, I think it is, in South Texas, has been planned for several years.
Okay.
It was just the funding and getting started on it and all that.
It went fast forward.
The new sterile
year.
fly facility.
Yeah, it went fast forward. And it's probably a great help to us in Texas that we have a Secretary of Agriculture who's from Texas and is working fast and hard on this.
But it's still next year before that facility's up and running.
You don't just, these aren't Dollar Generals, okay? Do they even build Dollar Generals? They just sprout up from the ground. They're like a mushroom.
There's one in a cow pasture in my little home community there that
you're mowing the yard and you go out the next morning, there's mushrooms that weren't there yesterday. That's Dollar Generals. They just pop up overnight. I don't know. But sterile fly facilities
only
are not.
Brick and mortar business that grew during the pandemic, by the way.
I don't even know. I don't know. I don't even know. There's a theory that they just build themselves. They certainly don't even employ themselves. There's nobody there. There's like one person working there. But this facility has been a long time in the coming. It's expensive. And why did we not have a sterile fly facility?
Well, all the sterile fly production centered up in that facility that's in Panama. So they produce something between 50 to 100 million flies a week in that facility.
Okay.
And again, just carpet bomb the snot out of that spot in the peninsula there.
This facility in Edinburgh, do you know what its production capacity is going to be? Have you
Last
heard?
I looked that up was going to be similar to what Panama was.
Okay.
But could scale up to, I believe it was 300 to 500 million flies a week. Which, there's two ways to look at that. Number one, a million is 1,000 thousands. I like to remind people of that. We talk about million and we don't think about. I read one time that the biggest number that we can really conceptualize with our minds is 1,000. And after that, numbers become a little bit meaningless. So when we talk about 100 million, that's a lot of flies to produce. But you also have to think about in the Darien Gap area in Panama, we only have about a 50-mile width and maybe 20, 30 miles on a side. When that thing gets to the United States border and across it, and we're trying to control the entire border 20 or 30 miles on a side, suddenly your fly density per acre matters a lot. So the number of flies you can produce, and they're also spinning up a facility in Mexico, if I remember correctly, in central Mexico. So even though those facilities are moving towards completion, just having them online is not going to eliminate. This isn't going to be a thing where it's just going to burn out in 2 or 3 months and we're going to have it fixed. Right. If we're having active cases, and I looked at the APHIS, the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, which Division of USDA that controls all this and monitors all this. They have a dashboard. And if you want to know what's really happening, I advise people to go Google that screwworm dashboard. And when I looked at it,
I prefer to just look on Facebook instead of using factual governmental websites.
You make a good point. I disagree vehemently. But on there, when I looked this morning, there were 11 active cases.
Well, in Texas.
Texas and New Mexico,
Texas
in the United
Mexico.
States. Because there is the dog in New Mexico, and we need to talk about the dog in New Mexico.
We'll get to the dog. So all right, so it's here. We're going to treat it. So talk to us about life cycle and why the sterile fly and how we treat it. So I think we need to talk about two things when it comes to treatment. Eradication and treatment, breaking the life cycle, and then what we're going to have to do as producers in the field to treat animals from prevention and cure of an infection.
Yeah, so we ought to pop up that graphic of the life cycle there, and I call that a graphic because it is kind of graphic. It's not very much fun to look at, but if we look at that, and those of you playing the home game in your car, I'll
pull over right now and pull up this graphic.
Both hands on the wheel. Don't be looking at your phone. So we have to start somewhere in the life cycle because it is we can sing Hakuna Matata if we want to, but it is a circular kind of a pattern. Let's start with the fly because the fly is the vector of transmission. So the adult female fly, she breeds one time with a male, and that's it. So that's where the sterile fly will come in. We'll talk about more in just a second. So once she's been fertilized by the male or bred by the male, then she seeks out, usually by smell, but also by sight a little bit. She looks for disruptions in the environment and the patterns of the environment. They're attracted to lighter colors a lot of times, it seems like. But mostly she's going by smell to be drawn to an open wound. Now, when we say open wound, we all think about some 4-inch long gash that's bleeding profusely and really in bad shape. This can be something as small as a scratch or a tick bite. Okay, but the bigger the wound, I think the more propensity that those flies are going to be drawn to it. She's drawn to that wound. She doesn't lay her eggs in the wound. She lays her eggs next to the wound in almost a shingle-like pattern, somewhere between 50 to 200 eggs or so per laying batch that she's going to have there. And so those eggs are visible to the naked eye. They're kind of white and they're a little elongated. This is why I say that a lot of people generally aren't going to be infected by screwworms, because I think you would notice if you had several eggs laid on your...
And shower.
Showering's pretty important. My wife would agree with that. So they lay those eggs there. The female lays those eggs, as females are wont to do. And when those eggs hatch, the larva, the maggot, which tends to be your word of choice today, that larva is hatching out of the egg and then crawling towards the open wound. Once they get into the open wound, that's where they're going to begin to chew and burrow with those big shiny mandibles they've got. They'll burrow into the flesh of the animal. And this is where the problem really begins to happen, because it's not the screwworm that's going to kill your animal. Okay?
Yeah.
It's the secondary infection that's going to kill your animal. And I think probably the more infected that wound gets, the more screwworm flies are going to be attracted to it. And an untreated animal is just going to get worse and worse, and that wound's going to get bigger and bigger. So this was a part that I thought was really interesting about this life cycle. For several days, depending on a number of different factors, usually about a week or so, those larvae migrate into the flesh by eating through the flesh. That's where the name really comes from on screwworm. It's going to be painful. It's going to be ugly. There's going to be an infection there. But after they've burrowed in there and gone through their growth stage at that point, they actually drop out of the animal and end up on the ground, in the soil. And they burrow into the soil a couple of inches and pupate. So they'll go into a different stage in the life cycle there. They kind of metamorphosize, and they're there in the soil for a few days. And once they've pupated there for a little while, that's where the live fly, the adult fly the juvenile fly hatches out of that pupa and then starts the cycle anew. So part of the life cycle is actually in the soil, not just in the animal. The problem here is when you look at that life cycle as a whole, let's look at horn flies. I'm pretty familiar with horn flies.
On the horn flies, let's talk about horn fly, because there's an interesting fact I've been told about horn flies and how far they don't travel as far as one would think.
Right.
They tell me that they DNA tested horn flies. Your horn flies and your neighbor's horn flies, they're not related. They don't travel very far.
And we're contrasting here, just so everybody understands. We're talking about horn flies versus screwworm
So
flies.
I am curious because with the fact that horn flies don't travel very far, and I'm going to get into like some rotational grazing, talk about how we can try to break these life cycles by physically moving animals around the ranch. I haven't looked into this, and I'm probably going to ask you a question unfairly that you don't know the answer to. Any idea how far these flies can fly?
A surprising distance. In a day, pretty easily a couple of miles.
Okay.
And over the...
that is not... Other flies, to my knowledge,
no, these flies are made to travel. They're made to travel because, again, they are obligate live tissue parasites. They can't lay those eggs anywhere except in the wild, in live tissue. So they've got to be able to travel. A hornfly is a blood sucker, basically. And so once a hornfly finds a herd of animals to live on, they don't leave. I tell people it's like a cruise ship. If you know the buffet is good and the drinks are free on your cruise ship and another one's a half mile away, you're not going to swim over there to see how the buffet is. You're going to stay the one you're at.
That's right.
And so the screwworm fly, she's made to travel. And she's got a life cycle, the adult fly, of several days. And the whole life cycle complete is about a month, 3 weeks to a month, depending on temperature and humidity.
And this 18 to 28 day life cycle, we got 18 to 24 here on the graphic. That is most flies. That most flies live within that. So one of the techniques used in one of the advantages of rotational grazing. So a lot of times we'll move those things paddock to paddock. We move them very short distances. But these guys will lay these ranches out in a way they can make a big move. So what they try to do is they go, and then they make a big move to get those cattle across the ranch and then start working in a pattern so that in theory and in practicality, those larvae, those internal parasite larvae, they're in the manure. Mm-hmm. So we want them to hatch out and not be near the buffet. Yeah. So if we can move cattle away from those hatchlings so that when they are looking for a place to go lay their eggs, we don't give them a host. So that works pretty good with horn flies and some internal parasites because they don't fly 2 miles. Yeah. So, and 2 miles.
They just don't generally do that.
It's not, we can reduce the opportunities. Yeah. It's a proven technique. That's not going to really work for us here. These guys, 2 miles, I'm going to go visit some ranches that are more than 2 miles. in a couple of weeks, but I don't have anything that's 2 miles.
Well, and that, I think they can, that's for a day. It's not like that animal just flies 2 miles and falls over dead. They're going to fly until they either die or find a place to lay their eggs. So if you look at that life cycle, when we talk about hornflies, we know that the hornflies larvae are going to be in the manure. That's where they lay those eggs. And so we know if we can find an intervention that works in the manure, and there's an insect growth regulator
IBR,
that works really great for that. Shout out to my friends at Central Life Sciences.
I'm not a big drug advocate, but I like this one. It goes through.
I don't think that's a drug because it naturally mimics the hormone that fly has.
Passes through the animal. It's in the manure, and then they
doesn't hurt the dung beetles and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, so there is a interventional spot that can occur there with the hornflies, and we exploit that, and it works really well. By the way, we have been trying to control hornflies for
my whole
100
life.
years. We still got hornflies. Insects are notoriously difficult to control. They work at living 24 hours a day. They don't take days off. They don't take vacation. They don't take sick days. They're out there all the time. When we look at this life cycle on the screwworm, there's not an easy interventional point on there because it's not going to affect all your animals. It's not going to be in their tissue in a way that is easily controlled.
Well, I can't treat their manure. I can't treat them with something that is in their manure, which is the home of other larvae.
Yeah.
So we can't do that. They're living in the soil. So our shot is the sterile male.
Right. So to go back to the sterile insect technique developed, I believe, in the 30s, 40s, somewhere in there, probably coincided with the development of atomic energy and the atomic bomb and radiation. That was all pretty big there, 20s through the 50s, and it was going to solve all the problems, maybe create a couple more problems we didn't know we had. But you can, from a sexual fertility standpoint, on insects, you can irradiate them with a specific dose and cause the males to be sterile. So these sterile fly facilities, they perpetuate this life cycle in a controlled environment to grow male flies. And they irradiate those flies so that they can't reproduce. They release those flies into the environment. They release them in high enough numbers that hopefully they outcompete with the males that are naturally occurring in the environment that are fertile. And remember I said that the screwworm fly female only mates once, generally speaking. So if she mates with an infertile male, she can lay all the eggs she wants. Those eggs won't hatch out. They won't become the larvae that are the problem in our animals there. Now, why can't we build these facilities faster? That's a question I thought of. Why can't we just, usually if we decide we have the political will for something, we just pile money up on it until we smother it.
Yeah.
Right? The problem here is a couple of different things. Number one, think about having to build one of these facilities. So we're gonna breed screwworm flies in the United States.
And keep them contained, I hope.
Yeah. So there's the big
sure
question, right? How are we going to build this facility? And the protocols are all there, but think about how many layers of perimeter security you need to have to keep the flies inside that facility so you don't cause a bigger problem than you're trying to solve.
Again, it's not a Dollar General.
No, not at all.
The complicated, complex facility.
You're going to have a facility that's got a negative pressure differential so that the flies can't escape through the walls or anything like that, so that any air comes into the facility. It's not terribly different from if you've seen the movie Outbreak and they're talking about this is a class 4 viral facility. It's not quite that kind of dire situation, but they've got that kind of thing in mind. The other thing is you can't just irradiate these flies, guess at the dose, and then turn them loose.
Yeah, you can kill them or not sterilize them. I'm sure there's a range. I'm sure it's a pretty precise dosage.
So you've got some quality assurance things that have to happen in there, QA for those people in the industry, to take some of the flies out of that batch, test them, and make sure that they are really infertile. The other thing we got to think about here is, let's say that it's on the lower end of what I read about in the last couple of days, that they want to produce 300 million sterile flies at that facility. So we're not going to start with 2 flies, but let's just imagine for a second that we started with 2 flies. You probably remember, like I do as a kid, the commercial about the lady who really loved her shampoo. And she loved it so much that she told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends. And after about 10 seconds, we had a whole screen full of women that were really excited about their shampoo. That's how I think about these the growth phases of these flies.
20-something day life cycle.
Right. So it takes a defined amount of time, because if you start with 2, in 20 days or so, we'll have 4. And if they all live, then 20 days or so, we could have 8. Remember,
in theory, we might have two. We might end up with 200.
Yeah.
You know.
So it
100.
takes time, and you can't bring 50 million out of Panama and bring up here as a starter.
Because they're
culture.
using those to.
Yeah, they need those.
We're still fighting that Darien Gap. We're still fighting that war.
So all those things accumulate together to mean that we are 6 to 8 months before we get to a releasable number of flies out of that facility in Edinburgh where they're building it right now. And I promise you, they're nailing stuff up and pouring concrete as fast as they possibly can.
Yeah,
they're heavily motivated. Rio Grande Valley is an important agriculture place. There's plenty of all kinds of row crop and animal production agriculture that goes on there, and they know that that's where we've got to stop this thing.
So we're going to get to the impact of this in a minute, but so we're going to let's talk about for a second. So this is how we're going to try to break the life cycle and beat it with sterile flies. So, but now in the everyday out on the farm and ranch, that we're going to have to be out looking at cattle, doing things practically, battling these things. And by the way, you're required to report them. If you find an animal infected, it's important that you report it so we can control.
Let me say something about that really quickly.
Some knucklehead, I'm not going to name a name, some knucklehead in the state of Texas said he wouldn't report one on his ranch.
Well, I think, there's some mistrust of the government. Again, pick your side. There is holdover from people who don't want the government in their business. And then somebody watched HUD. You ever watch HUD? Paul Newman and Patricia Neal. It's based on a Larry McMurtry book called Horsemen Pass By.
Oh, yeah.
But in HUD, the father's cattle become infected with hoof and mouth disease, which hasn't been in the United States. Taylor Sheridan.
Not in that movie then and not in now.
But in that movie, they get hoof and mouth, if I remember right. It may be another disease, but I believe it was hoof and mouth. And they have to euthanize the entire herd. There's a famous scene in that movie where they're out there with Winchester rifles shooting all the guys' cattle.
Now, that happened with tuberculosis. I mean, I know of herds that got...
And maybe that's what made my memory
faulty. They dug a pit with a dozer and
piled
shot
in there.
herds of cattle and burned them and then buried them.
But everybody remembers the videos from England from 10, 20 years ago when they got, I believe that was hoof and mouth over there. And that was hoof and mouth.
Oh,
where they euthanized the herds. And in those kind of things, that's necessary. In screwworms, we can treat individual animals and they'll fully recover.
Yeah.
And they'll make it into the food chain and be totally safe.
And be totally fine. I want you to...
But that's why I want people, if you suspect that you have some in your dog, or don't be shy about it. It's the law, number one. But number two, you're not helping anybody if you don't report that.
Because those reports are going to allow us to focus on that area with sterilized flies. Once we have,
they're going to come in there and carpet bomb.
They're going to fly over sterilized flies. So I talked about my granddad's PTSD of treating.
They'll also, just to finish that thought, I'm sorry. They'll also control movement of animals in that area. You won't be able to take a warm-blooded mammal out of that area without some kind of an inspection.
It'd probably be a county by county basis.
So when people ask me what are going to be the big consequences of this, it's going to be pretty inconvenient for some people and mildly inconvenient for everybody.
Well, since you brought it up, and we'll come back to treatment. So I love this. 4 days ago, since we now have cases in Texas, Mexico says that livestock from Texas can't come into Mexico, the host home of where our screwworms came from. So I thought that was just a genius move on their behalf to protect their country from our infected state, which got infected by screwworms from Mexico.
Well, they've checked the box. Now they can
and
go
then
safe from Texas.
The other thing that came out, and this is not going to really affect agriculture that largely, cattle from Texas will all know, any animal that's been in Texas, cannot go to Canada without a 21-day quarantine period. So for cattle, that's no big deal. And I've never heard of any Texas cattle ending up in a Canadian feed yard. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. Where this is going to come in play is as we get in the rodeo season here, you have people who are going to rodeo in Texas, take their horses, and they're going to rodeo in Canada. And they're going to have to figure out how to overcome this. They either have a set of horses they only take to Canada or a set of horses they rodeo in. But it's, but I love that this is a southern Texas problem. And so if you were to drive from Texas to McAllen, from Canada to McAllen, when you get to the Red River, you are halfway from Canada to McAllen. So Grayson County
on the way somewhere.
Grayson County is a long ways from Canada, but Grayson County, I just feel like, but again, how big a state Texas is, but the whole state of Texas and maybe New Mexico now, if there's a case in New Mexico, any animal's been in Texas and Mexico can't go to Canada without a 21-day quarantine period. So that's going to not really affect livestock production, but it is going to affect people in equestrian events, those type of things.
Yeah.
So back to treatment. So my granddad, they treated these cattle. They had to go out and cut them out and put these salves on them and doctor them. And so one of the concerns, a friend of mine down on the Gulf Coast that's a large rancher, they called them ropers and dopers. He said back in the day, you had a guy rope the animal and then somebody go out there and put this salve on him, and usually is a more skilled cowboy to rope and get the animal tied down, and someone to go out and deal with this paste and put it into and treat it. But I want to point out that my granddad, they didn't have Ivomec, they didn't have antiparasitic injections, they didn't have Baytril, they didn't have Thailand, they didn't have antibiotics, because that's where the animal's going to get sick and die.
Yeah,
is from the infections that come from these open wounds. So we're at a big advantage battling this thing today versus what my grandparents dealt with in the 40s and 50s.
I think regionally too, this will differ region to region, but I think animal husbandry has changed where we look at animals more frequently than maybe we did during that time period, because during that time it was more of a survival of the fittest kind of a mindset. If I don't want a cow that I have to babysit all the time. And I think as animals have become more expensive, as they become more productive and worth more money, and as our technologies have allowed us to keep a bit closer eye on them, I think we see these animals much more often. I think that's going to be a kind of an arrow in our quiver as well.
Well, my buddy Vance, who's down there on the Gulf Coast, he has hired 2 cowboys that don't normally work for him. They work for him part-time. He has hired them for his calving season. He's hired them for a 45 to 60-day period to be 7 days a week checking every animal he owns daily to try to, and there's not any in his area. He's just getting ahead of it.
Yeah.
So I think people doing things like that are really going to help us. The adult cattle, a lot of the data says that ivermectin, a very common, dewormer, antiparasitic, is very effective against this, but baby calves they're not born with that.
Right.
So they can be given Ivomec within 24 hours. I didn't know when you could give a calf Ivomec, but it turns out anytime after 24 hours after birth. But to protect those that's not normal. We usually don't put a dewormer in a calf till he's months old. So they're not going to have that. And even then, a cow, her level of ivermectin is going to have to be pretty high. She's going to have to have been pretty close to a recent injection, have enough ivermectin in her system to battle these. But those wounds can be treated, and then with an antibiotic, we'll be able to prevent those deadly infections. Yeah. So that's what the people who are really trying to get on top of this down south is. We're going to be on top of it. We're going to topically treat them, but we're going to give that calf. The antibiotic is probably as important as the antiparasitic agent, because if I treat a infected calf, I could give him ivermectin, but that's going to help later, not with these. So it's going to be important that they treat that. Back to, we talked about the impact. So I think we're better equipped to treat them today. What's going to be the impact on you, the consumer, besides you're seeing it in your news feed, and it's a great political topic to make a lot of wind out of?
Number one, just to tie this back to the topic we were just on, and I think it's one of the most important things that we can say to people on this podcast. I'm going to look at the camera now and talk to y'all. I swear, people, please don't get on the book face and see what Cousin Billy Ed said about his pet bobcat in Michigan and how he kept screw worms off of it. Please do not mix whatever concoction that somebody came up with. I know Matt just said ivermectin, and I know for some of y'all that's a little bit of a trigger word, that fixes everything. Don't go.
It's a good product. It's a good product.
It works for what it's supposed to work for, but don't go to the local hardware store or animal supply store, buy horse dewormer and smear on your cat in the hopes that it will keep screw worms off your cat. Your animals in your yard that you see and touch and pet and inadvertently examine every day are very probably not going to get screw worms. If they do, listen to me, please. For the love of someone's God, listen to me. Take that animal to the vet. Seek professional treatment and advice on how to fix that.
And honestly, that's not even because I'm as concerned about your pet. Your pet's probably going to be fine.
Right.
It's because I'm concerned about that animal being a host and being a hot spot.
Right.
And we need to know about that infection
So we
and
can control
treat
it.
that area. Treat that area.
It's not, the hornflies flying is going to spread this at a predictable rate. And we're not done with, we're going to see through the rest of the summer more and more cases is my prediction. I'll be shocked if we don't. Because obviously, when you look at the county map on the APHIS website on the dashboard, you see how widespread it is. Now, the dog that's in New Mexico, that animal was transported there. And that'll show you how human transport can really spread this. The ones that are along the border, I feel like those are more the flies moving on their own. So obviously, they're in the environment, they're active. There will be sterile fly releases in those areas, but I don't think it's going to overcome what's already there. So we'll see more cases on through until we get to the wintertime. And then in the wintertime, that's when we'll see the cases begin to pare back.
And we're going to jump to a graphic in a minute about how these fly.
But I
want to put a bow on consumer fears. Consumer fears, household people's fears of their pets. We put a bow on that. Meat. Well, I'm not going to eat beef. I might get screwed. That's not going to happen. So we deal with parasites in cattle today. There are things cattle end up at harvest facilities and have, if you happen to have a screwworm infection in an animal, end up at a harvest facility. One, hasn't happened yet, and that would be a massively big deal, and it would get treated as such. But
what are the 3 Ds of a harvest facility? Disease, down, dead, right? Yeah. So those animals don't, if they have visible lesions or disease and that sort of thing, they don't make it into the food chain. If they can't get off the truck for whatever reason, they don't make it in the food chain. If they fall over dead in the lot before they go into the harvest facility, they don't make it.
If they present, so cattle, you're like, how do they know if cattle are diseased or sick? The people that look at cattle every day, we know they hold their heads down, they droop, we pant. We know what a sick animal looks like. They're not going to send a sick animal to a harvest facility.
They inspect them when they get there,
and then when they get there, they have suspect pins. And they'll take, if they question an animal, they'll take its temperature.
Yeah.
They're going to take, so they take its temperature. So if they're going to see an open wound, they're going to separate that animal out of that pen, and he's going to go get looked at by a veterinarian. All these big harvest facilities have veterinarians on site look at these animals. So they're USDA provided. So but if they got past all of that and they got on the harvest floor and there was a wound, that's getting cut out. We see things get cut off of animals currently. We'll see cattle, they'll have a thorn in their that's under the skin. You don't see it.
In their shoulder.
It's shoulder or hip, and it's healed up around it, and you get in there and it just doesn't look great, but they cut around it, they cut it off. A USDA inspector looks at it
all the way around it.
Yeah, and approves it or says cut more. We're set up for this. Okay. Yeah. There are people in place, there are systems in place, there are techniques in place. No way, no how are screwworms going to get through the meat system. And then cook your meat to 125 degrees and you'll be fine.
And just for clarity, that's not the trim we talked about on the hot dog hamburger episode.
No.
If we got a bad lymph node, if we got a bad bruise, that's anything like that is going not to dog food or anything like that. It goes away.
Yeah, it's treated as such. It does not go to a rendering plant. It goes basically to a landfill.
Yeah.
So your food is safe. So how is this thing going to travel? What we are coming on summer. So this pun intended, this is going to give you a hotter topic. This thing is going to get hot. There's going to be a heat map. Things are going to warm up on the screwworm. Pick all your puns, because these flies, they thrive in warmer weather.
Yeah.
And I think, do we have that graphic of showing where they kind of travel up to? And as you get, this is historically where we've seen them. Now, obviously, as most of you are aware, sometimes you have a hard winter, sometimes you have a softer winter. So this is a great scene where we have had problems. And I was making joke earlier that even the screwworms don't want to live in Mississippi and Alabama. I don't know, and even part of Louisiana. But I'm kidding, my friends are over there. But whatever reason, they didn't have the problem in the 50s that everyone else did. You see, mostly this was a central Texas thing in southern, very close to the border states, but we did have this migrate. And I wonder if this is why my granddad, we had this problem. I know there was a drought in the early 50s, so we probably had warmer than normal weather.
Yeah.
And these flies probably migrated further north than they had. And that may be why we had a problem that led to the eradication program kicking off in 54 and getting going in 58 through 62.
Well, and we know that insects and wildlife are not really good at observing internal and external borders.
Weird.
So, when we think about this, that it's only a Texas problem or it's only whatever, remember that the way these insects survive the wintertime is either their life cycle slows way down and it takes them way longer to go through the entire cycle, or the pupa don't hatch out immediately. They kind of overwinter in the soil. So think about, and these don't dig down very far into the soil. So think about where the soil freezes a couple of inches deep for a few hours overnight. That's where those aren't going to survive.
Well, I just want to look at this map.
By the way, I want to be scientific here for just a second, because if I don't cite this map, it's plagiarism. But if I tell you that I got this from Oklahoma State from an extension website,
Cowboys,
I knew you'd love that. Why did you make the Texas Tech guns up symbol?
No, we got guns too.
Oh,
that's why we're like sister schools. We're gun schools.
Can we be brother schools?
Sure. Okay. I'm sorry.
So Oklahoma State extension, that's where I found this. And so think about where it's going to freeze and where those insects can get to, and that's what really is going to restrict it. This isn't going to be a problem for cattlemen in Montana.
I'm thinking Canada's pretty safe, eh?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, it's certainly possible that you get a hot spot up there, but winter's going to fix it.
Yeah, for 2 months.
Yeah.
July and August would be a problem up there. Come September, it's over.
But remember what we talked about early in the podcast today. These insects are endemic to this area. They are native. And mostly when we talk about things that are native, we talk about that we want to keep them. And that's one of the reasons it's so difficult to, within an area, I hate to say eradicate, because that sounds like we've totally eliminated them. You can only move them. A lot like fire ants. If you get fire ants in your yard, there's some ways to kill them, but mostly what you do is push them into your neighbor's yard when you try to control them. And that's the same thing here.
And so like the boll weevil. So I was part of the boll weevil eradication program, and so we're never there.
Thank you for your service.
You're right. Did several years. So what I did in that program, I had a 4-county area in Oklahoma that I went out and put traps, and I checked those traps weekly during the breeding season. And if I got a certain number of boll weevils in a trap, they would fly that area and spray those fields. And so we haven't completely eliminated the boll weevil, but we keep it in check through a managed program.
To that point, we didn't discuss this earlier, there are live trap programs that go on, especially in the counties that are infected right now. That's part of APHIS's playbook, is that they put out live traps, and I'm sure we're going to see more of that along the border.
And that'll be a trap with a pheromone in it that's going to attract that breeding female, because is how we do the boll weevil. There's a pheromone.
Well, in this case, it's a smell that mimics rotting flesh.
Okay.
So you'll probably know if you're near one of these traps pretty
on
quickly.
the boll weevils, it was like the nightclub for boll weevils. It's like, hey, party's over here.
Yeah.
Go over here and find a mate. You should do that at church, not nightclubs. But anyway, my wife's gonna watch this. But that we trap those flies. That's how we draw them in and determine whether we have a population that needs treatment or not. Yeah. So there's probably a case can be made that there's probably a few screwworm flies that were out there, but we're looking harder. So
and the harder we look, the more we're going to find.
Yeah.
That's another reason that I think we're going to see more and more cases in the next few months, not just the weather, but the fact that we're actually looking really hard. And people, once they know they're here, some people who are civically minded and want to help their neighbor and do the right thing, I'm talking to you, are going to be more prone to report when they actually get one of these infestations.
Yeah. So I think, the big takeaway is this is nothing new. We've fought this battle before. We're fighting it today with better tools, better medicine, better techniques, better livestock management skills, better. I mean, we're as a whole, we're doing a better job of looking at these animals than like to your point, they probably did in the 40s and 50s. And, I think that our technology today to ramp up and breed these sterile flies, if we got rid of them in the late 50s and 60s, I mean, I think we should be able to do a better job today than we did then. I mean, they didn't even have electric windows on the trucks back then. Come on, we're going to King Ranch eradicate these flies. So I don't think the American consumer needs to be concerned about there's a lot of things affecting your food supply. This could cause less calves in the marketplace. This could cause, but as we look at the majority of where they are, they're bigger factors. And we'll jump to those bigger factors that could affect your food supply, beef supply, than this screwworm that aren't getting the media attention that this is.
Do you think this will cause beef to become more expensive directly related to the screwworm?
Well, it's going to get blamed. So beef was already trending. So remember, cattle prices have been going up, and there's a delay of when those prices get to the consumer
because of the smaller herd.
But because of the lesser herd, and there's another factor going on right now where we're seeing mountain cattle, we're seeing Wyoming livestock sale barns running 5,000 to 9,000 head of cattle per week, running 2 sales a week
because of the drought.
Because of the drought, where those cattle should be up on high mountain pastures or on those lush mountain valleys, grazing that short grass. Those cattle are coming to town at a rate that would normally be 500, 1,000 head a week. Livestock sales up there, they're running 5,000, 9,000 head of cattle a week. I saw a sale barn that they're running Wednesday and Friday. They're normally a Wednesday barn. They're running 2 days a week. So those cattle are going to go into the supply chain smaller and go on feed, but that's going to cause a shortage in the future.
Yeah.
So those cattle are going to go in and get fed and get pushed along.
Not a dire shortage, but it's just going to mess up the supply
a little bit. It's going to mess up a supply chain, so that's going to affect things. So you may see that in the future and think, oh, screwworm. There's that. We're already short. You got the drought, that's affecting things. People aren't retaining cattle because of the drought in that Northwest. I'm going to Montana soon, and there's my friends out there, they're short on water. And so that's probably affecting their retention rate on holding heifers back. They're probably staying tight. And so that already a lot of things supplying, and then tail wagging the dog here. So there's a lot of news right now. I know you sent me a link about the largest beef packer in the United States closing a couple of facilities. One of those facilities, I think we can both agree, is pretty dated and in a region. I mean, Philadelphia, they really raise a lot of cattle over in Philadelphia now. Is that a really good place to have a harvest plant?
Yeah, I think that's mostly servicing cull, Holstein cows and that sort of thing. Not to say that we needed less packing capacity in the United States, but they were killing, I think I saw 2,300 or 2,500 a head a day at that facility. The other facility they closed was not a slaughter plant.
Not a hard facility.
It was a processed meat facility.
And there was another processed meat facility down in the southeast in Georgia, I believe, that closed a few weeks ago. And again, it was a antiquated plant. It was a very, very, very old plant and just couldn't be upgraded. And I love that article. 85-year-old meat plant shut down due to cattle shortages. Like, maybe it's shut down because it's 85 years old and just needed to be moved to an update. But
But those things aren't due to the screwworm.
That's not due to
The
screwworm.
two that closed this week, it would be really easy for people that didn't understand the system to see that, and correlation is not causation. Just because one thing happened at the same time another thing happened doesn't mean that they're really related. That's more about the contraction in the cow herd and the supply of cattle going into these kill facilities, and just those companies trying to be more efficient and not have, they're losing $100 to $200 a head. So think about that. If you're losing that kind of money on a 2,500 head a day facility, you're probably not going to keep that facility open.
You're going to stop that.
Yeah.
You're going to quit doing that.
Yeah. But not related to the screwworm.
Not related to screwworm. Not related to screwworm. So the other factor out there that will affect cattle, where the screwworm is going to affect cattle prices, is the futures market. Because 95, 97, I'm seeing some numbers now saying 98% of people playing, I'm going to call it playing in the futures market, have nothing to do with cattle. They're not shorting or hedging cattle. They're not buyers of cattle. They're not sellers of cattle. They're speculative investors into a commodity market. And that's going to affect things. I call it the tail wagging the dog.
Well, and nothing drives volatility like volatility, especially in a population of people that are day trading that don't know here, as my dad would say, come here from Sikkim, about what really moves things in the cattle industry or in any production agriculture industry, that they don't understand that, just because a calf gets screwworms, it doesn't instantly fall over dead and therefore not enter the food supply.
So I think to wrap up screwworm, a whole show on one topic, it's here. We're dealing with it. There's a plan to deal with it. It's not the most dire thing facing the beef production in the United States.
It's not great.
It's not. We're not in love with it. We're not sure how the Darien Gap got violated and it got here, but it's here.
And we'll deal with it.
We're going to deal with it, and we're going to keep your food supply safe. And we're gonna keep things. We're gonna keep moving agriculture forward in America. This too shall pass.
Well, and I'd like to know. Go into the comments wherever you're listening to this podcast or watching it. Go in there and ask us some more questions that we didn't answer for you.
Yeah,
I'd love to know.
Please bring your social media myths to our table. Yeah. We would love to analyze those and look at those and get them out. Well, you're going to love this. So this week's Bourbon of the Week. Pinhook. So not
a type of stomach worm, if I remember right.
A type of worm. So
hopefully not used in the production of this whiskey.
I don't know who. No. So Pinhook was actually. I don't know why someone named a racehorse Pinhook. I don't know why someone named a racehorse Pinhook, but they did. So a Pinhook, I thought it'd be an appropriate. Plus, I'm going to have these guys here in a few weeks. You could come to this event, Dr. Abney. We're going to have Pinhook here. Their master distiller is going to be here, and they're going to bring samples of barrels, and we're going to do a whiskey blending event.
Oh yeah,
some VIP. So we're going to figure out what barrels go together. Like what's the best recipe for ice cream? Is it strawberries and cream, or is it peaches and cream? So we're gonna figure that out. But cheers to a great episode here, another great podcast in the book. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all for tuning in. Look forward to those comments. We appreciate your follows. And hey, American consumers, keep buying American agricultural products. They're safe. We need your support. And farmers, ranchers, keep doing what you're doing, because America trusts you. I believe in you, and the world's counting on you. Till next week, Brad Good with some whiskey and rain, which we had some rain, and now we've got some whiskey. So cheers, guys. Have a great week. See y'all soon.
Lost in life, lost away.